to this Council on Foreign Relations meetings. We are so very honored to have the President of Mexico, Felipe Calderón. And before we get started, let me say that this meeting is on the record and it is being communicated to New York by video conference. So we beg you, turn off all wireless devices, phones, Blackberries, not to vibrate, but off, really off. And as it is customary to preserve the maximum time for our conversation with the President, my introduction will be undiplomatically short. You have the President's resume and your papers that were given to you as you entered the hall. So let me simply say that President Calderón, the youngest of 5 boys, earned a bachelor's degree in law, master's degree in economics, and a master's degree in public administration at the John Kennedy School up at Harvard University. He became a supporter of the Party for the National Action Party, PAN, early on, becoming the president of the youth organization in the late 90s. He became its president. And before the 2006 election, as president of Mexico, he had served as a deputy in Mexico's Federal Chamber of Deputies and as Secretary of Energy. Now, he will leave office in December, remembered as the president who built the most universities, 96. The 16,000 kilometers of highways, the bridge that connects Mexico's 2 coasts, providing faster access and therefore more efficient trade, and the passage of the First Employment Act, which provides incentives for companies to hire people just entering the workforce. And he also faced the daunting challenge of the violence spawned by the drug cartels that left 50,000 people dead. A poll taken just this past August showed his approval rating above 64%. We are so honored to have the President of Mexico here with us. And Mr. President, we welcome you to this podium and look forward to your remarks.
Good morning, Ambassador. Thank you for your words. Well, it's an honor to be here today at the Council on Foreign Relations. For more than 90 years, this institution has been at the forefront of analysis to understand the challenges and foreign policy choices facing the United States and the world. 6 years ago, in my first informal address, I told the Mexican people that it was possible to transform Mexico. I said that we could transform Mexico into a more prosperous nation with a dynamic and competitive economy. I said that we could build a fair society with more opportunities for everyone. I was convinced, as I am now, that we could transform Mexico into a safer nation with a strong rule of law. I can tell you today that we have made great strides and have put Mexico on track to making this vision a reality. I would like to share some reflections on how we have transformed Mexico into a stronger nation and a better neighbor. Let me start by talking about the transformation of the Mexican economy. As you know, we had to confront the worst global economic crisis in living memory. Mexico was particularly vulnerable to this shock because our ties to the American economy and the consumption in this country, which it was at the epicenter of the crisis 3 years ago. Fortunately, we took the necessary measures to prevent this crisis from becoming a major catastrophe. In doing so, we were guided by three basic concepts: financial discipline, economic freedom, and increased competitiveness. And this strategy has paid off to the country. First, Mexico has preserved sound economic fundamentals. Many countries put in place counter-cyclical measures to protect their economies from the shock waves of the financial turmoil. And we did as well. In Mexico, we implemented counter-cyclical measures to save jobs and keep our industries afloat. For instance, we created specific programs to save jobs in export-oriented industries. We reached an agreement with the unions and the companies in the sense that as long the worker accepts to earn 1/3 less on his salary, and the company accepts to pay 1/3 of his salary, the federal government accepted to pay the other third part of the salary. And in that way, we saved more than 500,000 jobs right in the middle of the crisis in export-oriented industries. We increased government transfer to the poorest and established a temporary jobs program. And doing so, we created another 500,000 temporary works for the people. And of course, all these cost a lot of money. Our public deficit reached levels of almost 4% of GDP in 2010. And we understood that today's deficit are tomorrow's taxes. And the market always punishes fiscal lack of responsibility. That is why expanding public deficit to stimulate the economy is a one-shot deal. And we understood that. Once you do it, you have to take measures to rebuild your financial equilibriums. The big mistake made by many economists during the crisis was to forget that you can use public deficit like this once. But if you try to use it on a regular basis, you will face, sooner or later, tremendous problems to finance such deficit. And that is exactly what is happening with several economies in Europe right now. And that is why we put in place an exit strategy to regain a fiscal balance quickly. And this strategy included several painful measures. For instance, increasing tax revenues, reducing public expenditures, promoting structural reforms, and an aggressive deregulation program. We also shut down a very inefficient energy company, Luz y Fuerza del Centro, which saved the government more than $5 billion a year in subsidies. And thanks to fiscal discipline, public debt is at historically low levels, and our foreign reserves are above $160 billion, more than twice the amount of our total foreign debt. And we have maintained the lowest inflation levels of the past 7 decades. Another important factor behind Mexico's stability is our financial sector. While in the U.S., the crisis started in the financial markets and in the banking sectors, in Mexico, the financial sector was not part of the problem, but part of the solution. Thanks to the improvements in regulations, Mexican banks have a capitalization index of 16%, almost double that the recommendation of Basel, and well above that of countries such as China, England, or even the US. Second, we maintain our strong commitment to free trade. This is easier said than done. And let me remember, at every G20 summit, one of the usual paragraphs in the final declaration always say that all countries pledged to refrain from adopting protectionist measures. All the countries used to say, we reject protectionism. And time and again, 15 out of the 20 members put such measures into effect in the following days. Only Mexico started to reduce tariffs right in the middle of the crisis. Mexico, on the contrary, has reduced tariffs from 12% to 4% on average, and entered into new free trade agreements, such as the Alliance of the Pacific with Colombia, Chile, and Peru. And a few months ago, Mexico joined the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP negotiations. This will give Mexican trade the biggest boost since NAFTA came into effect. Third, we work hard to increase our competitiveness. Despite the crisis, we boosted investment in infrastructure. To give you an idea, the 20,000 kilometers of road we have built and repaired are more or less equal to the distance between the North and South Poles. We also double our bet in our own people by building, 96 was the figure last year, and today is 140 new public universities. And today, more than 113,000 engineers graduate each year in Mexico, a higher figure than in Germany, Canada, or Brazil. And what are the results of this strategy? Today, Mexico exports more manufacturing goods than all the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean combined, including Brazil. Mexico now accounts for almost 13% of U.S. imports of manufactured goods, and in 2005, Mexico's share was below 10%. 10 years ago, about 90% of the country's export went to the U.S., and last year, that figure fell to 76%. When I took office 6 years ago, Mexico was the 9th largest car exporter to the world, and today we are the 4th largest car exporter. Mexico is now the 2nd largest importer of American products in the world, and we buy more U.S. goods than the rest of Latin America combined, and more than Japan and China together. Indeed, this deep transformation of the Mexican economy is of critical importance to the economic success of the United States as well. But if we want to guarantee our mutual prosperity in the long run, we need to do more. We need to maintain North America's competitive edge over other regions. And the key to get there is more integration, not less. NAFTA was a very important step, but our economies must work to deepen our ties further and build on this foundation. A second deep transformation that is occurring in Mexico is that we are becoming a middle-class nation. Of course, this does not mean that we have ended poverty once and for all. What it means is that the average Mexican families now has a much better quality of life than it did a decade ago. According to the scholars Rubio and De La Calle, in the last years, Mexican families have improved their access to housing, cars, durable goods such as home appliances and computers, health and education services, and entertainment, all of which are staples of the global middle class. Let me give you, for example, on how public policies have helped to this end. First, universal health coverage. For my government, access to health services for everyone is a fundamental human right. This is why we made an unprecedented commitment to improve health care that has resulted in a historical achievement, universal health coverage. And doing so, we have built more than 1,000 new hospitals or clinics and rebuilt more than 2,000 more. Second, expanded education opportunities. Today, for the first time, every child in Mexico can attend elementary school. And we have expanded university enrollment from 24 to 34% of young people at superior levels. Third, stronger social programs. We have in place a strong support network of programs, which include conditional cash transfer to help the poorest families, oportunidades, pensions for the elderly in poor communities, 70 y más, and daycare centers in urban areas for working mothers, attended by other mothers in town. And fourth, more home ownership. Home ownership is a yardstick of economic performance and of the strength of the middle class. Thanks to a combination of a stable economy, a solid financial system, and government-supported programs, in the last 6 years, more than 5 million Mexican families were able to buy their own house, a record figure. So the improvement of living conditions in Mexico is having a positive effect in the continent. For instance, according to a Pew Hispanic Center analysis, net migration from Mexico to the U.S. has steadily decreased in recent years and finally reached zero in 2010 and probably became a net outflow from the U.S. in 2011. Of course, this can be explained by the increase in border security and the economic downturn in the United States. But there is a strong argument that better opportunities in Mexico have also been a key factor for this phenomenon. So, by first time ever, net migration to the U.S. is zero on average. However, we must not forget that migration is a natural phenomenon for two countries that has been going on for as long as the United States and Mexico have existed and will continue to happen naturally. Our economies are clearly complementary. As a labor-intensive economy, we have the ability to supply a capital-intensive economy such as the U.S. with qualified and hard-working Mexican workers. This is why I believe that an agenda for the future should continue to focus on ensuring that migration takes place in a legal, secure, and orderly way so that the U.S. economy is strengthened and Mexicans do not have to die while trying to get a job. We must draw from the values we share as neighbors and partners to find solutions to this common problem and help the many workers who today live in the shadows of this society. And I want to take this opportunity to recognize once again President Obama's decision to give some young immigrants the opportunity to continue contributing to the strength and vitality of the United States. It's a positive move for both countries that I applaud. And now I want to talk to you about a third fundamental change initiated during my term in office: the struggle to consolidate the rule of law in Mexico. I know this is an issue that has captured headlines in the United States and around the world. and it has been one of the main challenges my administration has had to face. Over the years, criminal organizations grew in power until they became stronger than the local authorities in several places, in some parts of the country. And even before my term started, violence and crime were major concerns across many cities in Mexico. This is why we decided to face the problem head-on with the full force of the state. We implemented a comprehensive strategy with three main components. First, to confront the violent criminal organizations and to support overwhelmed local governments, we deployed the federal police and the armed forces. This is giving the states and municipalities time and room for maneuver in order to rebuild and strengthen their law enforcement agencies, especially police corps at local level. Second, and more important, we have strengthened the federal police by increasing the size of the force from 6 to 36,000 officers. They are also better trained, better equipped, and better paid. We are helping the states to do the same, and we are vetting any top officers in federal police and passing through a very important and particular set of tests for new members. And we are moving to a more transparent and efficient judicial system based on oral and open trials, just like the one you have here in the United States. Third, we are investing heavily in education and health to tackle the social causes of crime, opening rehabilitation centers for addicts, and rebuilding public spaces like parks, soccer fields, and community centers. I have to say that Mexico has not been alone in this security effort. We have found in the Obama administration a spirit of renewed cooperation to face common problems under the principles of shared responsibilities. But there is no doubt that much more must be done, particularly when it comes to dismantling the financial operations of criminal organizations in the U.S. and reducing American demand for drugs. We need to have a coordinated and bold initiative to get to the root of this problem, which is the increasing demand for illegal drugs in the U.S. As long as this market continues growing, money will keep flowing to the pockets of the criminals. And of course, the best way will be to reduce illicit drug demand in the U.S. But frankly speaking, if that is not possible, all alternative solutions must be considered to curb the massive profits of criminal organizations. And that includes market alternatives that prevent drug trafficking from causing so much violence and death. And there is another problem that has become vital for the security of Mexico and many other nations: halting the uncontrolled sale of assault weapons to criminal organizations. Unlimited access to assault weapons in the U.S. is a key factor in the current strength of criminal organizations. You can see a clear correlation between the moment in which the assault weapons ban expired here in the U.S. in 2004. And that is exactly the moment in which the violence in Mexico started to grow. And it is clear that the more weapons you have available, the more violence of homicide you will have in any part of the world. You can see the same phenomenon either in Africa or Central America during civil wars and other phenomena. And that is exactly what is happening in Mexico as well. During my term, we have seized more than 150,000 guns and weapons, and more than 80% of them were sold in an American gun shop. And there is 9 gun shops in the border with Mexico per each Walmart in that city. So for Mexico, it is absolutely unfair and offensive that so many lives are lost because of this business, whose purpose is to fuel the profits of the arms industry. It is possible to think in a regulation that it was established here in the U.S. in the 90s, the assault weapons ban. This is a problem that has to be addressed if we want to build a safer North America. And finally, I would like to talk about a profound transformation in our role in the world. Mexico is no longer a spectator in global affairs. We are becoming a nation committed to actively participating in the solutions of global challenges. For instance, the COP16 meeting that Mexico hosted in 2010 was a milestone in the global fight against climate change. The agreements reached in Cancun were an important step towards more effective international climate finance mechanism, such as the Green Climate Fund, a Mexican proposal to channel resources to adaptation and mitigation measures around the world. And we are also the first country in Latin America to chair the G20 meeting in June. During the leaders' meeting in Los Cabos this year, we reached important agreements such as the capital injections of over $455 billion to the International Monetary Fund. Moreover, the Los Cabos Action Plan for Growth established commitments to deal with the Eurozone crisis and to strengthen sustainable economic growth. Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, Mexicans are working to build a better nation, a stronger and safer country where the rule of law prevails, as well as more competitive economy and fairer society. If Mexico continues on this path of transformation in the future, it is on the threshold of becoming the prosperous nation our citizens wish for and deserve. In this day and age, however, no nation can succeed without the support of its strategic partners. The more Mexico and the United States cooperate, the more we can build the future our people rightfully demand. Both the U.S. and Mexico will start new presidential terms this year. As both our economies are well on the road to health, this is a window of opportunity to strengthen the bilateral relationship. The upcoming administration in Mexico has a solid foundation on which to build a stronger future, and I wish my successor all the best. As I look at how far we have come, I have never been more confident that Mexico and the United States will continue deepening our integration and strengthening our strategic partnership as we face up the challenges of the 21st century. It has been a pleasure to stay here, and of course, I will attend all your questions. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, we thank you for those very fine and fulsome remarks. I would like to ask you, in view of your interest in open trade and what you've accomplished, what do you see as the prospects for the United States, Mexico, and Canada in the Trans-Pacific Partnership?
But the point is, we must to understand how important is that for our people and our economies. And if we can get this agreement, we will connect our economies to the most prosperous region in the world, at least in 2 decades. And that is the idea. My concern is that there are a lot of protectionist spirit, if I can say that, in local politics. And the same is, I suppose, in the United States and in Mexico. So a lot of people believe that the more protected you are, the more prosperity you will have, and it's exactly the other way around. But for any politician, it's easier to talk about protection and talk about borders and barriers than to talk about real freedom in which you and your constituents should compete. And that is a serious concern. And the problem is the protectionism is a ghost that appears exactly in the middle of the crisis. So, what could be the chance to move forward in the TPP? I have one problem I am seeing, that the day for a real advance in this process was delayed 1 more year. So what I listened in the APEC meeting is there won't be an agreement this year, which was exactly what we were expecting. And it is necessary to regain momentum in local societies to reach the goal we are looking for. And probably the political campaigns, first in Mexico, but especially the presidential campaign here, could be a temporary obstacle for TPP. But once the American citizens decide this important question, I hope that we can move together common efforts in order to get the TPP probably next year. And that measure will open big opportunities for our 3 economies.
You mentioned that the North American Free Trade Agreement was fine and that we should build on it. A lot of people have thought that the 3 governments could do more to create cohesion and competitiveness in the Western Hemisphere. Is that possible? Or are there disputes between us, like maybe the tomato dispute, that holds us back from accomplishing what we might aspire to for creating new opportunity?
There will be a permanent battle, if I can say that. First, let me congratulate you in person for this tremendous achievement, which has a historical dimension, the NAFTA, several years ago. And I think it is possible and it is necessary to build upon the NAFTA. In particular, we need to do several things at the same time. One is we need to improve the infrastructure in the border. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of bottlenecks in those sides, and if we are able to, if we reach to increase the competitiveness of the border itself, and the infrastructure will be great. Second, we should to understand that the NAFTA could provide a lot of opportunities, not only for Mexican workers and providers, but also for American workers and providers. Actually, there are serious research in which we can demonstrate the real benefits in terms of jobs and personal income for any one of the states here. So we need to explain to the people what are those benefits. But again, the problem that free trade will face at any time, and in particular in electoral times, is protectionism. And that is the case of the tomato. So it seems like this election is so competitive, and the idea is that the tomato could vote and could pick president. And it looks like incredible, if I can say that, no? But let me tell you that Mexican tomato are very good for American consumers, are cheaper. And if you are looking for how to improve the economy, you need to open the border to the Mexican tomato, not the other way around. But if the tomato is going to select the next president, I think this country is in problems.
Let me ask this last question before I go to the audience. We want to keep protections down, and unfortunately they are going up. You mentioned the unfortunate nature of the tomato problem. What are the prospects of opening energy so that the United States and Mexico could collaborate on developing a really necessary asset for our economies?
Well, it's a very important question. I think that today there is a window of opportunity to open a little bit, at least, the energy sector in Mexico. And I say this because understanding that is absolutely necessary. Mm-hmm. Because today we have a new challenge and a new opportunity as well. Let me talk, for instance, about Pemex. For any public company or owned state company, its managers are looking for the way in which they can get more benefits with less resources, like any other company probably. But in this particular case, along the technology is moving ahead, and now technology is allowing us to get natural gas, in particular shale gas, in a very cheap way. The price of natural gas in the North American region is going down dramatically. Mm-hmm. And that it's good for industries because it means cheaper energy for any industry and any economy. You can remember that 15 or 10 years ago, the price of natural gas was a serious obstacle for the economy. I remember when I was Secretary of Energy, the price of natural gas was like $12 or $13, and today the price is probably $2 or $3. Mm-hmm. So that is an amazing opportunity for the region, and that means that Mexico could be even more competitive, because now we have a very high competitiveness in manufacturing sector. We have very well trained workers. We have more infrastructure. We have free trade with the United States and with other nations. It's a set of very competitive aspects. Plus, today we will have cheaper natural gas. So we have everything to win. And that is the opportunity. But the problem is, for Pemex manager with very few public resources, you should decide what could be the most profitable activity for the company. So you need to decide either to invest in natural gas with very short marginal revenues and with a lot of risk, because you need a lot of technology and massive investment, or to invest in oil, which it could cost probably $20, $30 per barrel, and you can sell that barrel at more than $100. Clearly, Pemex should go towards the oil, even in the very deep Gulf of Mexico. By the way, we discovered last month a new reserve, a new field in deep waters in the Gulf of Mexico. It's the first time Mexico has such kind of discovery, at least in 4 years. And if we confirm the forecast of that, that discovery could imply to double our proved reserves in a very short time. But let me go back to natural gas. So we need to think how can we open the natural gas sector in order to promote massive investment, and with that we can get more job creation, more energy efficiency, more natural gas at very low prices, which means more competitiveness for industry, cheaper electricity for people, and a lot of benefits. But in order to do so, we need to change the legal framework of this matter. Now, why I am saying that there is a window of opportunity? Because I do believe on that. President-elect Mr. Peña believes that it is necessary to reform the energy sector as well. So if you have this political willingness to do something in energy sector, there is a window of opportunity.
Excellent.
So what is going to happen? On my side, there is all the political willingness that is required.
Well, we'll go to the audience. I know that there are questions here, and I would ask, if you're called upon, to please state your name and affiliation and wait for the microphone to come to you. On the aisle there, Richard. Is there a mic there?
Oh, thank you. Richard Downey from the Center for Hemispheric Defense Studies. Mr. President, thank you for your remarks, and thank you for being here with us at the Council on Foreign Relations. One of the hallmarks of your administration was, in my view, the very courageous decision to confront organized crime. And you talked a little bit about the strategy, the comprehensive strategy to do that. President-elect Enrique Peña Nieto has talked about making changes to your strategy. Have you talked to him, or perhaps has your team talked to his transition team about how to make continuity and not lose many of the gains that you've made during your 6 years in office? Way ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. First, let me express my gratitude because you framed the question exactly in the way it is. So we are fighting organized crime, which is not exactly the same that war on drugs, which is the expression coined here in the United States several decades ago. And it's absolutely, not absolutely, but it's different. So our aim is rule of law. So we have not some kind of obsession against drugs itself. It's rule of law, which must prevail in the country. And according to that, we need to enforce the law, we need to fight organized crime, and organized crime is linked with several criminal activities, of course drugs, but not only, and probably not mainly drugs, but also human traffic, and also weapons traffic, and also piracy, and kidnapping, and a lot of very dark activities. Second, I respect the decision of President-elect in any matters, including the strategy for security in the country. Now, let me tell you that I was following closely the electoral campaign, and a lot of candidates told about, they were framing the expression in this way: we will continue the effort, we will continue the strategy, but we will make some changes. Okay, and any candidate told exactly the same in that way. When any candidate was asked what could be those changes, at least myself, I could not see clearly what were going to be those differences. Because on my understanding, for instance, one expression is, we will use more intelligence and less force. And that is correct. But what is exactly what we are doing, we are improving the information and intelligence capacity of the public agencies. Actually, we build probably the state-of-the-art Center for Intelligence for Federal Police right now. And we are using, as I remember a conversation I had with President Bush when we were talking about we were framing the Merida Initiative at the very beginning of my administration. And I was trying to explain exactly that. We need more intelligence, so we need any kind of instruments and technology in order to be able to prosecute criminals and prevent crime. And trying to explain that, I told President Bush, well, have you ever seen this TV show 24 with Jack Bauer and so on? Because I want all the instruments of this guy. And that is exactly what we are doing. So it's quite interesting to see the Center of Federal Police, or several centers that we are building, and the same with the Army, and the same with the PGR. So we are improving intelligence. Actually, we are sharing intelligence with the U.S. more than ever. That could be one change, but it's exactly in the same track we did. Other could be, what else? We will be more preventive than reactive. Okay. But in any case, you need to be very active in any field, no? And I make some kind of contrast, or I use a metaphor coming from health services, no? Of course, we understand that even in health services, you need to be more preventive. And we are applying a lot of programs in order to reduce the obesity in child, for instance, and the people. But once you have an adult with diabetes, you need to apply him a very reactive treatment. Otherwise, he will die. No? So that is exactly what is happening in Mexico. Of course, we need, and actually we did a lot of universities. Doing 140 new public universities from greenfield is not exactly only a question of education. It's a question of opportunities for young people. And I understand that the day in which Mexico reached full coverage for any young people in the country, we could solve a lot of the security problem. So you need to be preventive, yes, and that is the reason why we are creating education opportunities for young people. But at the same time, you need to face the criminals in the streets. You cannot allow that the criminals take the control of one city, substitute the authority, because the idea is this: the criminals, the organized crime, is doing some kind of takeover of the authority in one city. They reach to a town or even a city, they threat or bribe the local authority, including police corps, so they become the new authority there. So they started to apply their own law, they started to collect their own taxes, and they started to use public force. Actually, there is no other public force than their public force. So in that sense, it's a challenge to the state. Now, you, as federal government, are you going to wait in which you can build all the universities in that town? And can you wait several years until all the kids pass through those universities? How many years is going to take that? And what is going to happen with the people during those 10 or 20 or 30 years? So you need to defend the families. There is no option to act. And that is the problem, I think, that Mexico suffered a lot, because this lack of action of the government allowed the criminals to take over a lot of regions. And it's not, let me tell you that it's not only a question that the government started fighting the criminals and that then the violence went up. Of course, there is a relationship, yes. But frankly speaking, I do believe that the violence could be there even without the action of the government. Why? because we are now in the face of a new criminal phenomenon. In the past, last century, what was the core business of the criminals? Narco traffic. Even that is what the word means. Traffic to U.S. and that's it. And it's a problem of calculus, if I can say that. It's only one dimension if you think in a line crossing from the Pacific Sea to the American border. It's one line, one highway, and one point, single point in the border. But what happened in the last 2 decades? The criminals started to think in another business additional to narco traffic, which is drug retailing in Mexico, which is different. Why? How many people do you need in order to cross 1 ton of cocaine to the United States? I don't know, 10 people, 20, maybe 50, maybe 100? Okay. But how many people do you need in order to distribute 1 million bags of 1 gram of cocaine, which is the same ton of cocaine? You will need hundreds or maybe thousands of people. A lot of people distributing. It's absolutely different, the business. And upon that, you need to think that in the old business, if I can say that, they only need to care about one line towards the United States. But if they are starting to go into the retailing business, they need to cover the whole territory. Like any retailing, think about Coca-Cola or think about PepsiCo. It's exactly the same. They are trying to cover a territory. And in order to cover a territory, they started to clash, to shock each other. And this disputing over territories is the origin of violence. It's not the action of the government itself. In other words, when our economies started to grow, for instance, due NAFTA, Mexican income per capita went up from $2,000 a year to more than $10,000 a year today. And that implied that Mexican market started to be a very important consumption market for vehicles, for households, for whatever, including drugs. So they started to see our society as a market as well. And then they started to diversify their activity from only exporting, if I can say that, to distributing. And in this change, they started to fight each other for the territory. And that clash, that battle explained 80% of the violence, probably. Because it's the battle between the Zetas against the Pacifico, or now the Zetas split off. So now it's the Zetas against their old allies, which is the Golfo, and they are clashing each other. And today, probably there is another fight inside the Zetas itself. So the problem is this expansion. Now, the question was very simple, but I'm sorry for my answer. I use the opportunity only, but let me tell you, I do believe that next administration, at least is exactly what they are saying. They are going to continue the effort, and I think they have the right and the duty, I suppose, to analyze another alternative. Now, let me be honest. You really want to think about another alternative? I cannot see anyone different from to think about the regulation of drugs in the global market, starting here in the U.S. That is the reason why I say, if we are not able, or you are not able to reduce the demand for drugs in a dramatic way, you need to think in different alternatives. And you have the duty to analyze any other alternatives in order to stop the flow of money towards the hands of the criminals. And that implies to analyze even market alternatives for that. Because if you want to talk about a real different way to do these things, that is the only one. Or the other is to resign the power to the criminals. To say, I won't fight with them anymore. Please be my guest. Take You like this government? Please take this government. You like that city? It's nice. It's cool. I like it so much, but take it. I won't fight. You cannot say that like a government, because it's the first duty. The first duty of any government is to preserve the right and the security of the families, and that is a very tough duty. Believe me, I know that, but you must to do that.
Yes, please, microphone.
Señor Presidente, muchas gracias por estar aquí presente con nosotros. My name is Christopher Broughton. I work with the Millennium Challenge Corporation. I have a related question, and that is the movement of arms and bulk cash to Mexico from the United States. What has your administration done to strengthen Mexico's own border security to prevent these illegal flows? Thank you.
Well, talking about weapons, so we are seizing a lot, no? 150,000 guns and weapons in 5 years is a lot. And we are establishing some kind of controls on the highways. We are working really hard on that field. Talking about stealing illegal cash, it's more difficult for us. For instance, we were estimating like 2 years ago, only in the banking sector, we detected like we could be like 14 billions a year, which it was dollars that we needed to send back to the United States, coming from the banking system. And we had not cleared the sources of those dollars. No? So that made us to take a lot of measures. For instance, we forbidden a lot of cash transfers in dollars in Mexico. And of course, I got a lot of reject, especially in border towns. And it implied a lot of political cost for my own party, but it was necessary. And we are reducing dramatically that kind of not well explained dollars in the banking system, probably towards 4 billion a year today. So we are reducing that part. The other, I presented to the Congress a bill in order to regulate laundry money. Well, probably that was like 2 or 3 years ago. What happened with that? Well, we are waiting one chamber or the other. Today is in the Senate. Probably tomorrow will be again in the Chamber of Deputies, and after tomorrow will be again in the Senate, but we are expecting an approval from the Congress. Well, seriously, I hope, and there is a new session and a new legislation in the Congress. Actually, I really appreciate that there are 4 senators here with me today from different political parties. And I think that there is a very good chance that we can finally an approval on this very important law in order to fight laundry money. There are a lot of interest against the law. For instance, we are asking to the people, you cannot pay in cash. For instance, when you buy a house, you need to pay by a check, which is obvious, on my understanding, and a lot of things, but some people don't like that, but it's absolutely necessary.
I think we have time for one more question. Let me come to this side of the room. Yes, please. Wait for the mic.
Margaret Daly Hayes of Evidence-Based Research. Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your very encouraging remarks about progress in Mexico. You are very proud of opening a large number of universities. Can you talk a bit about what Mexico is doing, needs to do to expand and improve primary and secondary education in order to enhance competitiveness?
That is very, very important, but let me talk about what we did. We reached an agreement with a very important player, which is the Union of Teachers. Union of Teachers is a small organization with probably 1.5 million members in the country. And we reached an agreement in order to improve the quality of the education. And there are a set of measures that we agreed, and those were first, in the past, a post of teacher was decided by a finger point, either the union or the governor. Today, for any post of teacher, any position of teacher, is decided by a contest between teachers. So today, if you want to get a position as a teacher, you need to compete with other teachers in order to select the best of them. And that is a structural reform in education. Of course, it's a long way to do that, but there is almost 100,000 new teachers appointed in that way. And that implies a very painful process. For instance, we suffer several strikes of teachers in several states. But that measure is on track, and it's a good one. Second, we are establishing an evaluating process for students and for teachers as well. And of course, there are a lot of resistance for that, but finally we got special exams in order to analyze the level of the teacher. And we are explaining, it's not a question of remove that teacher, it's a question of we need to see your weakness in order to help you to improve your capacities as teacher. Third, we improve the infrastructure in the schools. It's not a matter of federal government, by the way, because let me tell you, education as health is a matter of local level of government since the 90s. However, we understood that local government probably they have not enough money, or they have another priorities different from improve the quality of the schools, elementary schools. So we started to rebuild, the window, the basketball field, the bathrooms for girls, and so on. And in that sense, we have rebuilt 50,000 elementary schools. It's very small public works, but we are doing so. Fourth, we are establishing a new system of payments to the teachers. Because we are introducing economic incentives. So, if you are a teacher, the more your students improve, the more salary you earn. So in that sense, we are paying in terms of the quality. You want a very small piece of the salary, but it's improving. And finally, we reached last year another very important reform in which the so-called carrera magisterial was mainly oriented to pay to the teachers in order to how many seminars you could have. For instance, well, I don't want to make some examples of what kind of course they were taking, but today, 50% of the carrera magisterial, which is very linked with the money they receive, 50% depends on the improvement of your own students. According to the exams we are doing year by after year. Now, one outcome could be, for instance, the PISA test. In 6 years, we established a goal in PISA test, and we surpassed our goal in 2009, and probably we did the same this year. Especially in math, Mexican students were the students that advanced the most in PISA exam. so in particular in math, in 65 countries. Of course, Mexico is probably still today one of the last countries, unfortunately, on that. But we are advancing a lot, in particular in math. And we are measuring that in our own exams. For instance, the Enlace, it's an evaluation program we have. Last year to this year, for instance, if our goal was to reach 40% of good at excellent students, we overcome that goal in that sense in math. We are not doing the same, unfortunately, in Spanish, so we need to improve a lot. Now, talking about the challenges, I admit that this is probably one of the most demanding challenge for Mexico today, and it's absolutely necessary to do much more in terms of quality of education, and you need to get more cooperation coming from teacher unions. The paradox is there are two kinds of teacher unions. One has a lot of bad practices, if I can say that, or bad reputation, but the other one could be worst. So one is a lot of things that we need to improve, and that is, for instance, a new bill I presented to the Congress last month in order to reform the labor law, to open to transparency the finances of the union, and to establish direct vote and universal vote in the union and so on. But there is another group, another union, more radical. They refuse exams. They take the control even of the payroll of the workers. So there are some governments in Mexico that they need to give the money to the union of teachers, and the union pay the salaries according to its own criteria. So unfortunately, it's my own state, Michoacan, but that's a problem on that.
Mr. President, we could go on all morning. We really do thank you for your presence, but also your excellent and wide-ranging remarks. Let me make a request. Let me make a request of the audience. Would you please, out of courtesy, stay seated for just 1 minute and a half so the President can exit with his party and get to his next appointment on time. Just a minute and a half.
Don't worry for that.
You have to run fast. Thank you so much.